All right, so hello and welcome everyone to another session of Seneca Fintech Firesides. My name is Professor Ishan Srivastav. I'm faculty at the School of Accounting and Financial Services here at Seneca Polytechnic and the coordinator of Seneca Fintech. My co-host today is the amazing Edward Johnson, and our guest today is the absolutely spectacular Amir Feizpour. Edward, over to you.
Thank you, Ishan. Can everybody hear me? Am I up now? Great. Okay, good morning. My name is Edward Johnson. As Ishan has said, I am a tech professional based here in Toronto, and I'm going to introduce today's expert. His name is Amir Feizpour. Um, I've known Amir for around 6, 7, maybe even 8 years. He is what I would call a true polymath in the world of AI and fintech. As a founder of an ML community group here in Toronto, he's also an AI advisor and a speaker with a background in quantum physics and data science. And he's uniquely positioned to help us unravel the complex intersections between technology, finance, AI. And I'm going to really dial it down on the finance and really say on the AI side. He is a full-grown expert on the field of AI. And we're going to have a good time to find out about his background. He is an entrepreneur, but he also has a corporate background. So a real 360-degree kind of view of things. So today we're really going to be talking about the future of AI. We're going to be talking about what's happening currently as well. And I'm going to be breaking what they call the rule of three. So digital transformation, community. We'll be talking about innovation strategy. Um, Really about how AI and humans collaborate. And I'd like to start it off with a welcome to Amir and say hi, Amir, and amazing that you've turned up in the way that you did. And to say, start off by asking you, what does AI mean to you? And also, what does fintech mean to you?
Hello, can you hear me fine?
We can hear you perfectly.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you all. So what does AI mean and what does fintech mean? So AI to me personally means aggregate intellect because that's the abbreviation of my company's name. But I think the AI you're referring to is the artificial intelligence. So yeah, I mean, it's a definition that is changing over time, as the capability changes. But generally speaking, as humans, we like to create or replicate things that we see in nature, including intelligence and, artificial intelligence, or, probably more realistically these days, machine intelligence is our attempt at replicating what intelligence is like in nature inside machines. So, and then fintech is, a range of technologies that are used in the overlap of finance and for, financial management purposes. As we discussed, I'm not a super, like I worked at a financial institute, but I'm not, really, I don't have any claim to fame in, the financial side of things.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's a huge crossover between the aspects of AI and things that happen in the financial world and backwards. So let's start off a little bit about your background for your entrepreneurial journey and how you got here.
Yeah, sounds good. So my story is that I'm a physicist by training. I worked at University of Toronto to do my PhD in quantum computing, and then after that, worked at University of Oxford as a researcher, and then decided that I wanted to pursue industrial ambitions. So after a failed attempt at doing a quantum tech company, I decided that the next best thing was AI. So I ended up coming back to Canada and worked for Royal Bank for a few years as a data scientist, and then later an AI product manager. Uh, but I had this entrepreneurial bug, that you probably have heard of. And I was very antsy about doing more stuff with my life. So 2018, while I was still at RBC, I started building a community of AI people, mostly because I wanted to stay in touch with what was going on, because even in 2018, believe it or not, AI was moving very fast.
Yeah.
So my motivation was pretty much to stay in touch with people and, learn from what they are learning. That was really the motivation. But then very quickly, I realized that a lot of people have the same problem, and our community started growing very rapidly. Within a few months, we were a few hundred people. Within a year, we were more than 1,000 people.
Oh,
And within 2 years, we were more than 2,000 people. And then the pandemic happened, and therefore everything has started becoming way more global. And fast forward to today, we have 5,000 people in our community globally. And in 2019, I started a company just mostly to try it out, what the entrepreneurship feels like,
yeah.
while I was still at Royal Bank. But eventually in 2020, not knowing that the pandemic was about to happen, I left my corporate job to figure out my startup life. And the rest is history. It's been, 5 years uh, trying to figure out, where we can go with this cool new tools that we have in our toolbox.
That's amazing. Amazing timing to start a company just before a pandemic. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the community aspects and so on in a short while. But I'd like to just take advantage of your knowledge concerning digital transformations. The title is going to be Digital Transformation FinTech, but I think we're gonna say digital transformation has been a buzzword for so many years. And I'd like to find out from you how you've seen that digital transformation has actually changed the industries. Initially, it was going to be the finance, but I'm going to say overall. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do say that I'm not really a fintech expert, but for some reason, I always find my way back to financial industry.
The
Like I
money
corporate,
money leads to the money.
exactly. My work at the corporate one was obviously in financial domain, and now after all these years in a startups, a lot of my big clients ended up being from financial domain too. Like right now, I'm uh, two of my very big customers and potentially big leads that I have are all from financial sector. Like these are like venture capital firms, private equity firms, and what I see in a lot of them is that the bigger the company is, the more processes they have, right? Like these financial institutes are huge, or
Yeah,
private equities sit on top of companies that are very well established and have a lot of processes. So when you talk about fintech, or the applications of technology in financial sector, just the financial aspect of alone is a small part of a much bigger set of processes that they have, because any financial institute has a legal department, has a digital department, has a,
yeah,
I don't know, whatever else, operations. It has actually financial management, loan management, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these have their own processes, and uh, the role of technology is very hard to ignore, because if you want to make your processes more efficient, you have to, leverage technology. And of course, like when we talk about change management and transformation, it's always, tools, processes, and people, right?
yeah,
Uh, Tools, in my opinion, are the easiest part. Like that's the part that, there are a lot of good tools that get the job done. Where things usually fail is the processes and people. Usually we don't have the right people trained on the technologies that we need, leverage them effectively, and or there's a backlash, there's an emotional backlash to using that technology.
yeah,
And also processes are very interesting because uh, you have to have the right process in place to use the tools effectively. Otherwise, I don't know, like let's say you change something about your sales pipeline,
yeah,
lead generation pipeline, and all of a sudden have a lot of leads. and the downstream is not ready to handle those leads, then you haven't really improved anything at a system level, right? So like it has to be like there has to be a lot of systems level thinking. And I think change management without thinking about empowering people is probably doomed to failure, as we see in a lot of cases in the industry. And even the tools, like I say, they are available, but a lot of tools are not built with empowerment in mind, with the idea of
No.
can this fit easily inside the workflow of the users that we have.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, the tools part, that is, there are hundreds of tools, but bolting them together or even picking the right one is, or having the right consultancy to bring them into the environment can also be tough. Yeah. Okay. So that's quite a bit about transformation. I see there's tons of potential. That makes me happy to hear that there's so much potential. It isn't all done yet and finished. There's plenty more to go. Just going to switch quickly back to the communities again, because just as a disclosure to everyone, I actually met Amir because of me joining the community that he and his group set up, and through that I managed to work through about, I don't know, 7 or 8 projects with real clients. So I really found the advantage in that. And as Amir has said, he wanted to connect with people. So Amir, the group is now 5,000 people. What do you I mean, are you going to continue with the group? Have you handed it over? And what do you think the group has achieved concerning corporates as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the group has been, the community has obviously been evolving as sort of my interests evolve. You know, obviously at the beginning it was mostly AI people. Later, when I started my entrepreneurship journey, obviously a lot more founders got involved. And over time, you know, other people in the ecosystem also started joining, like, you know, I don't know, investors, corporate people, and all of
Okay.
that. So definitely the composition of the community is a very dynamic thing. So, and I think, you know, that's my mode of operation. Like I like-minded and interesting people around me. So as long as that is true, I think I will continue building and trying to build, you know, communities that people find value. And, you know, I'm a member of that community too. So,
Yeah.
you know, I also get benefit from, you know, the existence of such things. One thing that, you know, obviously is interesting is that, you know, we didn't want this to be one of those communities where everything is theoretical. We want it to be, you know, a lot more pragmatic and practical.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of the projects that you refer to are, you know, projects that we bring to our community for people to get involved in. And before we used to do that in a more of a marketplace type of model, where we just post a project and say who wants to work on it.
Yeah.
These days we do it a little more systematically because we are taking in bigger projects. But it's still, the community is the first place we look for talent and knowledge necessary to do those projects. So definitely there's still a lot of overlap between you know, the community and our commercial activities. And you know, one thing that I usually talk about is that almost 95% of our investors are somehow related to the community. Like they're either community members or uh, you know, we got referred to them through the community members. A lot of our commercial leads are coming from that. So it's a place where you can find anything that you seek pretty much in the professional realm, as far as it is related to AI
Yeah.
ecosystem.
No, that's brilliant, because it's encouraging also for the people who will be on the call or watching this, who are students or who are also corporate people who will be watching this, to understand that the community has a lot of talent to offer. Keep hearing about the war for talent. People can't. There are people out there, but you have to get in touch with the community, and it's good to see that's been set up. So I want to switch now maybe to ask you about innovation strategy, because I know that you have been one of the few founders that actually has. I remember you wrote a set of blog posts talking about your journey as you have pivoted back and forth and up and down. I don't know all the different directions, but you wrote some very honest blogs, but also related to innovation. So maybe you could, for the people here, talk a bit about innovation strategy, when to go, when not to go, and so on, and also the life of an entrepreneur.
So we have a few days to talk about all of this, right?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay.
You know, with like every startup type of thing, there's always, you've got the big plans, and the VCs say, give it to me in 1 or 2 minutes. So
Right.
take a few minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean, the joke here is that it's a very, very long story, but the very short version of it is that obviously startup journey is extremely difficult because you're the only person who's responsible for everything,
Yes.
especially as a solo founder or a small founding team, which is usually the case. Everything is on you, so you have to get it right. There's no safety.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of responsibility. So from an emotional point of view, from a physical point of view, even you have to be very, very careful about how you set yourself up for success. Otherwise, you're gonna fall down very quickly. But the good news is that there are a lot of people who have done this kind of thing, and there are a lot of them that are very open to talk about it. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of ways to learn about the problems that you might face and ways that people have solved those problems. So definitely, again, like being involved in a community of people who have done similar things and reaching out to them and asking for advice is definitely the best way to go about it. In terms of innovation and pivots and all of that, obviously we've heard like these days with AI, a common joke or meme is that, oh, the lawyer with AI is going to replace the other lawyers, or the doctor with AI is going to replace the doctors,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like insert job plus AI is going to replace insert job, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, so that's exactly what it is, right? Like any any organization that stops evolving, you'll have a very hard time staying competitive. That's true about humans, like individuals, all the way to big corporates. So and pivoting is a very, very significant part of that. Like a lot of people think, oh, I work in a corporate, I don't need to pivot, but that's wrong because you
Oh,
have to pivot your career to adapt to the newest thing, to the where the industry and the market is going. Same with the startups, same with bigger firms. So just having that mindset of being always curious and looking for the next thing that you can learn, I think is the most important thing that you have to stick to.
do you have I do remember many years ago, I don't want to show my age, but there was the head of Intel. His name was I believe Andy Grove, and he used to have a term which was only the paranoid survive. Meaning that even if you have a very successful corporation, you should always have a side of you that's looking for who is going to be attacking or taking away your piece of bread. Now, for you, Amir, as a founder, um, you know, I want to ask a little bit more about pivoting. When do you know what is the right time to pivot? And do you ever know?
First of all, I I kind of disagree with Andrew Groves. Uh, like I think what is trying to be said there is correct. Like you have to change, but like that specific framing, I think is a is more of a black hat version of it. I like the white hat version of it, which is only the curious will survive, right?
Oh, okay.
Although the curious will also get eaten more frequently, probably by the tigers. But
Yeah.
the curious were the ones who ended up crossing the oceans and finding new land. Right? Like the curious
Yes.
were the ones who went out and found all sorts of technologies throughout the human history. Right? So I don't think a lot of people who invented new interesting things and changed and increased the survival of the race were really paranoid. Maybe some of them were, but a lot of them were like, oh my God, what if I combine this thing and this other thing? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, let's try it, right?
Yeah.
So I think and I prefer that because that promotes more exploration and, that's a more expansive view of what the world should be like. And I think that's important to acknowledge because otherwise pivoting will be very difficult.
Right.
Because, if you're only looking for safety, it is very easy to feel safe locally if you just narrow down your point of view enough, right? Like you just
Right.
can think about, oh, I'm going to be safe for the next few months, like so I don't need to worry about it. And as long as you think that way but as if you think at any moment in time, oh, what else can I do to make it better? Whatever it is. That's where the pivot comes from. And I think, when people talk about pivoting, it sometimes feels like this massive life-shattering thing, but I think you're pivoting every day. Like every day that you try to learn something new, you're pivoting a micro pivot of your knowledge towards
Okay.
something more, right? And the
So
accumulation of
more incrementally rather
oh,
than
absolutely,
dramatically.
and right, absolutely, and if you're doing it that way, sometimes it is very clear that I've been doing all of these macro pivots every day to try to make X better, but it doesn't look like I'm going towards a maximum global, right? A global maximum. So at that point, you might have to go back to the drawing board. And so that's sometimes like that. Sometimes something in the market changes. Like for us, when ChatGPT came out, that was a massive market earthquake, right? So everything changed
Did that
about
sorry, did that affect your startup, your
significantly,
business? And tell us
significantly.
how. How did that affect you and what happened on, was it November the 22nd or something like that? What happened the day
Yeah,
after?
absolutely. Uh, no, that changed everything about what we were doing. Like, to the point that I ended up letting almost everybody in my company go, right?
Really?
Because, oh yeah, absolutely. I had to go all the way back to the very first drawing, right?
Wow.
Because the product we were working on was a knowledge management product, right?
Knowledge
And
management. Yeah.
and essentially what we were saying was that searching on Google for technical knowledge is stupid. Like there's a better interface that can be done with AI. And all of a sudden, these guys came along and provided that, but much better than what we were doing.
Right.
Like that very directly impacted us. But at the same time, it also changed the sentiment of the market completely. Like all of a sudden, people went from being very hesitant about AI to being very curious about it.
Yes.
It created a lot of confusion in the venture capital world. Like we were trying to raise money at that time, and a lot of my investor conversations completely changed from funding the company to being like, oh my God, what is this thing? Like, can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
So we had to like really go back. Like that was one of the very massive pivots that was far from any sort of micro pivot. And sometimes things like that happen, and you have two options: give up or figure it out. And fortunately, I was in a position that I decided to figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Can I ask, we're gonna move a little bit more now towards the future. Maybe not the future, the far future, but I'm also very curious at how people work with AI. We've seen in corporates that, some companies may just give you a sandbox with ChatGPT and say, use it, see what you can find out. Other companies are saying, no, don't use it at all. And it's going across all sectors. So fintech, yes, but AI tech, I think that's the main word it should be. Now, I know that you have looked very hard into knowledge, human knowledge, use of knowledge, and you did mention knowledge in terms of humans and AI, and we've seen that we are going to be doing more together with humans, AI and humans in the future. Could you say a little bit more about that? I'm quite curious about that collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
And
I
you can
mean,
take your time on this one
what's
because it's
that?
going to affect. You can take your time on
I'll
this one.
take my
It's going to
time.
affect
All right, so we are
everybody.
gonna have a few days then. Yeah, so I mean, the problem statement that we were very, very interested in, being a scientist or formerly a scientist, for me from the very beginning was how can AI help uh, with managing knowledge in different contexts. So originally it was the problem statement we started with in 2019 was, can we use AI to help scientists do science better, right? Like a lot of it was, can we use AI to help people read papers better, for example?
Okay.
And very quickly, for financial reasons, we decided that there is no money there, so we pivoted towards using AI for knowledge management in education. So we
Yeah.
did that for a while. And then many, many other iterations of that idea, like a marketplace model, like a knowledge management SaaS model. And most recently, we are still doing something very similar, which is, can AI be used for knowledge intensive sales processes? There are a lot of sales and of course, you can see the trajectory of the money. We've been like doing a random walk
Yes.
towards where the money is, which is in sales department. Uh, but we are still very interested in knowledge intensive sales, which is the type of sales where there's a lot of human uh, judgment necessary to figure out what needs to be sold and how it can be configured and et cetera, et cetera. So you could
Could you go a
imagine,
little bit, when you say human judgment, what
right. So
kind of
for example,
use case then?
yeah, for example, the typical example I use in my course is that if you're a biotech company, for example, selling your biotech device is very hard because it's not just like, do you want the brown one or do you want the green one, right? Like that's not the criteria. The criteria is, can this device do this extremely complex thing in my pharmaceutical firm and achieve these types of accuracy? Like that's a very technical conversation, right?
Yes.
So that's why a lot of companies like that have sales engineers. So the sales engineer is a PhD in bio whatever,
Yeah.
who is sitting with the marketing and salespeople along with the customer answering their technical questions because they're bringing their chief scientist to the conversation, to the sales conversation, to the
Yes.
purchase conversation. And that person is asking like, what is the accuracy of blah, blah, blah? And what is this device, I don't know, resistance to whatever. And you have to be able to give technical answers. And then you probably have to write a 5-page proposal about, this is a
Oh,
white paper of how we can help your company in so you can see that the process is not like going to Amazon and scrolling over a few
yeah.
pages and picking the biotech device you want. Like that's a very complex purchase process.
Yes.
And that's a very sophisticated example, but some of our clients are in construction, and that's very much the same. Like, their customer is sending them a floor plan saying, this is what our project is. Please give us a code for X, Y, and Z, right? Like, it might be the interior design, it might be this, it might be that. And again, like that is not something that you have a menu that you look at and be like, done, right? Like you have to have the
Oh, okay.
knowledge of,
Yeah.
how does this plan maps into these material to these
Yes.
types of internal design. Blah, blah, blah. So and these are the types of things that AI is not very good at because it requires that judgment. It requires that ability to reason and say, given this context, this information is necessary. I'm going to acquire this information from my resources that could be internet, could be internal knowledge bases, could be your databases,
Well,
and then combine all of these into a proposal, into a an engagement model or whatever it is. Service companies is another example. Like selling services usually very non-trivial. Like it is again not a menu that you go and you pick what you want.
yeah.
Like usually that involves a lot of conversation back and forth, figuring out how we can help them, etc.
So
Sorry, I
when I
forgot the
hear
original question.
Yeah, no, that's part of the of what I'm asking about. But what I'm leading to is again, people have been, in the media have been saying AI is going to take away all of our jobs. If you do not learn about AI, you will be replaced by someone who does know about AI. But just these two examples that you've mentioned, yes, slightly complicated, but and when you say that AI is not yet very good at handling that, does it give some hope to people, about AI instead of fear, would you say?
Oh, I mean, look, there has to be hope because otherwise, what are we doing, right? In my,
I'm with you on that. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, there's always hope. When, like, one of my go-to expressions is that your startup company fails when you give up, not when you run out of money, when your co-founder leaves, when whatever, right? It just deterministic fails when you give up. That's the same with any other context almost, right? Like you have failed when you gave up, when you give up, right? So there has to be hope, like, because otherwise, what's the point of trying anymore?
Yeah,
And that's why I like the thing that I said earlier, that the curious is the person that goes out and figures out where the hope is. Because
absolutely.
if you want to sit down and reactively consume what the media is trying to tell you, they're going for the dramatic titles, right? Like, of course, they're going to say, "Oh, we are completely doomed. Everything is going to shit, etc., right?" So you have to be the one who says, "Okay, I acknowledge that there are dangers if you stay stationary, but I don't have to stay stationary. I'm just going to explore and find where my new realm is." And of course, like, it is like just the same way that nobody with a pen and paper can compete with somebody who's working with a laptop, except in
Uh,
specific realms.
well, I
Uh,
don't know. I would say when it's raining outside, I can probably keep working while the person with the laptop has got to stop. Yeah.
right. Yeah, but in almost all other cases, a person with a laptop has an advantage, right? So now the question is, AI is going to be part of all digital devices that we have. So how would that fit into our workflow?
Yeah.
And of course, like, what you said is very interesting, that somebody who uses AI as a tool is probably going to have a bit of an advantage over somebody who doesn't, right? But the way this is going is also very interesting, because very like, we already have tools that are branded as co-pilots, which means that they're sort of sitting side by side by you and taking over some of the tasks that you traditionally had to do. And that direction goes even further, with the agents. They're like at infancy, but once the agents become better, once we have robust multi-agent systems, then we're going to be in a realm where uh, agents are effectively your co-workers. They're not just your co-pilots anymore. Like, they are taking over
Oh,
a
oh,
portion of the work.
yeah. I'm just going to jump in there. Um, so again, for the benefit of the audience who, again, some are studying about fintech, blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, and other aspects. But to imagine that you are going to now have colleagues, if you like, that are AI agents. Um, how do you think that's going to impact traditional people who, today we've got people, some managers are saying you all have to come to the office. You've got some managers who are saying you all have to work remotely. And then you add on top of that, you all will have to work with some agents. Tell us a bit more about what you think on that side, and how's
Well,
that going to evolve?
the short and honest answer is that we have absolutely no idea. And I'm not saying that just to be dismissive. I have spoken to economists and organizational psychologists saying, "How are you thinking about this?" And they're
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, I have no idea. I didn't even start thinking about it." Right. That's why, my firm is partnering with some economists from University of Toronto and some reinforcement learning slash game theory people from Amy in Alberta, to essentially develop that organizational theory for hybrid teams that are half machine agents and half humans. Because what we are thinking is that the traditional way organizations are organized is no longer sustainable for something like this. Like come back to office, like that's like the simplest problem to solve. Like if you're gonna have like what we don't know is how are people going to react to it emotionally? Are they gonna adopt it? Are they gonna be angry at the machines all the time? Et cetera, et cetera, right? There's a lot of game theory going on,
Yeah.
potentially that we haven't started modeling. I know there are a lot of people who are starting to think about it, including us, because we are implementing these systems and we want to know what the dynamics of these hybrid teams are going to be like. And therefore, we want to be able to create, for example, one idea that I'm thinking about very seriously is, whatever agentic system we build to automate the process, the same system has the capacity to be also turned into a gym where any junior worker can go and learn that trade to become senior, right? Because a lot of the tasks that juniors do are going to be taken over by agents. So how will a junior person become senior? So the only way is that the agent also trains junior people to become senior. So there are a lot of ideas like that we have to explore, and we're just at the beginning of it. The short
Right.
answer is that we have no idea how it's going to unfold, but that's exactly what we need to research and figure out.
So let me let me unpack some of that even for myself actually. When you mentioned about agents training juniors possibly as well as being part, could you without giving away too much that may be proprietary, could you give us a use case that we can get our hands on? Because I'm not thinking about a young person in a car shop being a mechanic learning. I'm thinking this is digital, what you're talking about. So could you maybe give us a use case and some processes or something that go with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say, I don't know, you're a junior data analyst that starts
Yes.
working for a venture capital firm, right? So before you even get hired as that, most probably you're doing a bunch of internships. What are
Yes.
the typical tasks you would do in your internship? Go research this topic and write a summary report for me, and then enter this data from these sources into these other sources, and then visualize it, et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera. There are a bunch of tasks like that, right? Like that's the type of things interns, and even when you get hired as a junior analyst, you would do, right? AI is already very good at all the above right now, right? Like all the large
Okay.
language models that we have are extremely good at extracting data and entering it into some other system. They're very good at researching and summarizing it, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that was the path that you would take. Those are the types of tasks that you do, so that as you do a lot of these, you accumulate the knowledge of why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing? Oh, okay, I get to this critical thinking ability, strategic thinking, to this
Yeah.
problem solving that now allows you to think big picture, think, complex problem solving, et cetera, right? So
Domain
now,
knowledge.
exactly, exactly. And a lot of tacit knowledge that you acquire from trying to do it, getting it wrong, the senior person telling you this is what you got wrong and this is how you should think about it,
Yeah.
repeat until you get it right, right? So now we are taking all of this away. You're essentially saying, well, we were using interns and junior people as cheap labor to achieve those things. Oh, wait, agents are significantly cheaper to
Yeah.
achieve the same things, right? Like, so there's no longer need, interns are no longer needed. So either the educational system has to pick up the slack, and good luck with that, or the organizations have to figure out a different way to train junior people to become senior. And what I'm saying is that the same system that has the intelligence to automate these tasks probably also has the intelligence to train the junior person to become more senior, right?
Got it.
So now, can the system, although it is not necessary, can the same system give a bunch of tasks to these junior people, observe how they do it, give them feedback, and repeat until they learn the task? It is significantly cheaper because the senior person doesn't have to spend as much time. And the
Yes.
senior person probably occasionally provides some things to the system, like saying, "Oh, I think our junior people should do these kind of exercises," right?
Yeah.
And then the
That's
AI figure out how to draft those and provide it and give feedback and blah, blah, blah. Like that. That's sort of the future that I'm imagining. That should be the flip side of the coin of automation. Because if
yeah.
we do one without the other, you're going to have a very, very rude awakening waiting for us.
Yeah. Maybe so that's great. Thank you for the use case. Perhaps you can say something then about the students and the managers, the people who are here, the real people now. How can they prepare? How can they upskill or prepare for what you're talking about? I imagine that's coming in the next years, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But how can we today? I'm sitting here in the room today, or one of the other people. How can I prepare for this? What should I be doing? What should I be
Yeah,
learning?
no, absolutely. I mean, that's honestly the most common question I get. And and I think, we've been on this trend since, probably decades ago, a couple of centuries ago, that being trained in one area and spending your whole life doing that is no longer the case. It
Yeah.
hasn't been the case in the past couple of decades, but especially today. Like the knowledge that you acquire is going to go out of fashion within a few years, probably. Very, very soon, maybe it is even a few months, right? Like as we are seeing, even in large language models, the joke is that, oh, do you mean the one about the large language model that came out now or the one that came out now, right? Like these things are
Yes.
changing all the time.
Yes.
So the biggest, so spending too much time acquiring one specific, like for example, learning how to use one specific tool is probably a risky investment. What is a lot more useful is, at least to build a foundation, is figuring out a system design, a capability, a routine, whatever you want to call it, that allows you to learn very quickly. In other words, learning to learn is the most valuable skill now, because when things change, the faster you can adapt, the faster you can pick it up, the faster you can use it, the faster you can be pragmatic. Uh, and that learning to learn involves a few different things. Like you have to be very careful and intentional about where you're getting your information from. Like you
Okay.
have to design your information input, right? Then you have to design routines for learning. Like, learning has to be part of your daily job. If you have any sort of mental block that prevents you from being curious, you have to address that, because that's going to be problematic, right? So
Okay.
it just has to be really thinking about, even like if you start thinking about it deeply, you're going to start realizing that, oh my God, even my physical fitness is important. Because if my body is not physically fit, I don't have as much appetite and or ability to absorb new information, right?
Yeah.
So once you start thinking about it, it is like a holistic problem that you have to solve to optimize your susceptibility for learning new information that is actually useful, not any new information that is a cat on TikTok, for example.
Wow. Okay. So stay fit. Go for a walk every Saturday. I think you're doing something like that. Don't tie yourself to the desk. But I'm glad to hear that you didn't use the term critical thinking, because this term is essential, and it's bounding around all the time in terms of preparing for the future. I'm still trying to work out how many different people will say exactly what that means in terms of preparation. I have my definition. Can you tell me what your definition is of the term critical thinking?
Sure. I mean, that's partly what I mean by being intentional. Uh, so, everything about your environment, like the more intentional it is, the easier it will be for you to absorb the information that you need and be productive. Uh, and it does require critical thinking. Like it does require you to think critically about causal relationships between different things. Like, do I need physical fitness to have a better memory?
Yes.
Do some research, do some thinking about it, critically think, and draw your own conclusions about it. Don't just believe the fact that I tell you, oh, if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, your memory is going to probably be, insufficient, and therefore you're not going to remember a lot of things I'm telling you. Just do some research about it and figure out if that's true, and then the next step of the critical thinking is environment design, because you don't want to be constantly in the critical thinking mode. Like, you want to solve a problem and create a process around it, and then stick to it so that you open up your cognitive bandwidth to try other things, try to learn other things and optimize other things. So uh, as long as you can convince yourself that there's a causal relationship between, if I do X, I will achieve Y. And
Yeah.
as long as you create a bunch of these types of heuristics in your brain and occasionally revise them, then I think you're doing critical thinking, regardless of what definition is
Got it.
in particular person's
Yeah.
mind.
Okay. Let's is it okay if I got 7 more minutes, Ishan? Is that okay? Good, because I think it's time for us to talk about ethics, regulations, but I also think we should talk about the future. I am an optimist, even though I might have sounded like a pessimist. I am actually an optimist. So I'm thinking about the future of AI and AI-driven landscapes. I was going to say fintech, but fintech, as I said, leads into everything else. Perhaps you can tell us what you see as some emerging trends going forward. You have mentioned the agentics and so on, but just a few other things. What do you see as the most disruptive in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, if you can even imagine 10 years ahead.
I do have a presentation that starts with the very first slide asking the question, what do you think a founder would look like in 2034? I should update it soon
Probably
to
like something
2035.
from Terminator, I would say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like essentially a solo founder with a exoskeleton that is, a bunch of agents that do sales and operations and marketing and human and machine resources now, and then the product development and et cetera, right? So in 10 years, I think that's realistic to see some solo founded companies that are actually, really productive and making a lot of money, but it's just one person with an army of gigified workers, including agents, right?
Oh,
So that's my 10-year prediction.
yes.
My 5-year prediction is probably a very early, mild version of that, which is, as I said, like that vision of corporate teams being hybrid of humans and machines. I think that's my 5-year prediction. That we're gonna see teams that are like that. Like really, to some extent, that we have figured out the beginning of what's the organizational arrangement for those kind of teams to work.
Do you
Uh,
believe that corporates will still have so many huge corporates, or will we have far more medium and smaller size corporates as well compared to today?
I I don't know the answer to that question, but I think if you look at the trend, most probably we're going to see even more flattening of the distribution,
Yeah.
because in 5 decades ago, 4 decades ago, probably it was a distribution that was very skewed towards bigger corporates.
Yes.
These days, we have seen in the past decade that companies were sold for many millions of dollars that are like 10 engineers, right? So like continue that dotted line and you probably will see, oh yeah, like there was a team that were like 3 engineers with a bunch of agents that were sold for. So I think that flattening of the distribution is definitely continue happening. And we are going to have a very long tail going forward.
Yeah.
And in terms of uh, ethics and regulation, we can get into those if that's where you want it to go.
Well, I think it is important. I know that in many MBA courses and other courses, they leave ethics and regulation till the end. I haven't meant to do that today, but um, we have a lot of ethics to think about as we bring in AI. I mean, just the fact that you just mentioned that, the company of the future or the solopreneur of the future will be it's kind of surrounded by lots of operations and agents doing things. Someone has to also think about the ethics that those items will making decisions. Is there a guidebook out there? I don't know. But what are your thoughts even as you deal with knowledge management and the dynamics of humans and AI? What are your thoughts about ethics and what
Yeah.
should we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally a very strong critic of regulation being effective in any of these areas.
Oh,
I don't think regulation is going to provide any sort of ethical guidebooks. If you look at it, a lot of regulators and people who are creating laws, Senate or whatever, they're still wrapping their heads around data privacy stuff that has been around for almost 2 decades, and they still don't have anything meaningful to say
Europeans.
about it. Like last year, the year before, we've seen big tech CEOs in front of the U.S. Senate,
Yes.
and you can look at it, watch it as a soap opera. Like it is so funny and disappointing to see the person who's writing the law has to ask those types of questions, right? Like it is stressful to even see that that's where we are. And at the same time, you're looking at large language models and OpenAI and Microsoft and Google, who are at least the parts that they have released are already pretty scary in terms of capabilities they have. So I have absolutely no hope for any government or any governing body to come up with a law or regulation that is first enforceable and second doesn't stifle progress and third meaningfully protects people. What I'm hopeful about is diversification. The
Oh,
fact that uh, we have many more engineers who are extremely rich and they are acting as investors who
yeah.
are coming from the backgrounds that are not like, oh, I only need to maximize my money. Like they're coming from the backgrounds that are like, oh, but what about the humans? What about this aspect? What about that aspect? And can I build engineering and dev tools that protect privacy? Our common friend, Patricia, private AI company, that's
Yeah.
a very good example of that, right? Like that they are a company that are building privacy by design. So while I have zero hope for any type of privacy protecting regulation, I have a lot of hope in a company like that is venture backable, who is coming out and saying, hey, you want to protect privacy? Great. Here are a set of tools that allow you to do that at the developer level, at the grassroots level, right? And that diversification of points of view, that diversification of ideas is exactly what we need, like bringing people who really care about these things, but also are empowered to create technology, to create tools that at grassroots level empowers people who should care about these things to build systems that are meaningful. That's why I care about doing that research on economic and social side of what I'm doing,
Yeah.
so that we can build tools that also train people to be upskilled when we take away their jobs, right?
Yeah, yeah, and in an ethical, and at least considering ethics as they do it, even if regulations are not keeping up in time. Yeah. So I have one last question, which is concerning breakthroughs. I understand that you've just given a forecast, well, a lightweight forecast for 5 to 10 years. Um, what's the most exciting thing that you are thinking about for the next 2 years? And it doesn't have to be in your company, but what's exciting you? Um, what should we be excited about for the next 2 years? Not,
Yeah. What I'm very, very proactively pursuing with our academic partners is essentially developing that theory of work that I mentioned, because we have no idea what the meaningful uh, team setting is for teams that are hybrid of humans and machine agents. And I don't subscribe to the idea that machines will completely take over, et cetera, et cetera. I think at least in near term, the much more likely scenario is hybrid teams. And, that's what I'm obsessed with these days, like, figuring out how can humans and machines coexist and collaborate. And actually, with our economist friends, a lot of what we're thinking about is, how can we create reward functions and
Ah,
incentive functions that are actually aligned with, you know, leveraging human strength and machine strength in a
yes,
complementary way, right? Like, because otherwise the system can chase an objective that is not meaningful. So we
yes.
want to be able to do this at the foundational level, like, provide the reward function that is optimizing for the right thing, which is, effective collaboration.
I'm interested to see. My last comment is I'm interested to see AI um, being interested in making more money and really emotionally being interested. It's one thing to say it's a function, but humans can be driven by money and benefits and work hard. I'm just wondering how it will be with the AI, but that's for another matter. I'm going to hand over to Ishan right now. If maybe there are some questions, Ishan.
Absolutely. Folks, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And while we're waiting for those, Amir, I have a few questions of my own. Now, first of all, I absolutely love the statement that only the curious will survive. That is so astutely put, and it's very quotable. So please forgive me, but I am going to steal it.
I'm stealing it too.
But you know what? You're absolutely right in the terms that there has been a rise in curiosity about AI, and a lot of people seem to be going in all sorts of directions in trying to understand what AI is all about and how exactly they can use it. In your experience, you yourself have talked to a lot of people from different walks of life who have very different understandings of AI. But what have you found have been the greatest misapprehensions about AI, where people were completely just off the mark in their understanding? You just mentioned right now, say, for example, the absolute soap opera that is seeing regulators trying to get their head around AI. Where do you think there are, and what should be their thinking in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I do see a lot of sort of bimodal reaction, which is a group of people that are either completely missing the point about the capabilities. Like, they think that, oh, it has to do all of these extremely complex things. As long as I write the right prompt, it will figure it out, right? Like, and that's not the case. Like, we are not there, and I don't think we will be there anytime soon. So just overestimating the ability.
Hmm.
And then on the other hand, a lot of people who completely underestimate, they're very skeptical about what it can do, uh, and or they're very skeptical about the impact that it will have on them, right? Like, they just assume, oh yeah, that's going to be years away, while at the same time their colleagues are probably doing pretty cool things with the existing
Hmm.
technology. So I think lack of balance on both ends is probably the most common pattern that I can think of.
Hmm. See, the thing is, I'm of the opinion that AI is not really like any other tech that we've encountered so far, in the sense that you just need to learn what it can do for you, how you can use it. You really need to delve a little deeper and try to understand what it's all about, how it works. So, how would you recommend someone with a very cursory understanding of AI, or someone who draws their understanding entirely from pop culture? How can they go and understand exactly how AI works and how it can be used, rather than because the thing is, we are living in an age where there's just way too much information, and a lot of it is entirely misinformation. So how can we distill what is relevant about AI and what isn't?
Uh, I use its three-step process.
Hmm.
Step one, delete all your social media accounts and unsubscribe from all newsletter. That is step one. Step two, find a few that are actually useful. You can talk to your friends who are more knowledgeable to figure out, if you want to keep your Twitter account, what are a few accounts that you should actually listen to. That's a step two, like, find a bunch of reliable sources of information. And a step three is And part of that, as Ed said earlier, could be a community that you're going to be part of, right? Like a community that does curate information and like has events, etc., right? So
Mm,
that's the second step. So the first step is hit the reset button. The second step is curate your resources. And step three is create a process where you revisit the first two steps regularly.
mm,
Every quarter, every year, every whatever, go back and be like, I subscribe to this podcast, but I listened to 2 episodes in the whole past year. I'm just going to unsubscribe. Subscribe to this newsletter, but I never open. I'm going to unsubscribe.
mm.
Oh, actually, there's something interesting that Ed told me about a few days ago. Maybe I'll go check that out. So that regular process of, and I think that's the only way that you can get the right balance between receiving information and not being overwhelmed all the time.
Mm. That's amazing. I mean, from what I understand, what you're saying is the best way to learn about AI without actually getting misled by multiple sources is to go back to analog modes of communication and talking to people who know about it. That actually makes a lot of sense. I've got a question here from Mary, who's one of our students. Mary says that I've noticed that using AI in my work and school tasks has made me more efficient and allowed me to balance both effectively. However, I sometimes worry that I might be relying on it too much. In your opinion, how can I ensure that I'm using AI responsibly and effectively without becoming overly dependent on it?
I'm gonna say something that uh, it's funny. A few days ago, I was listening to a podcast, and they were saying that, oh, a lot of these things that scientists are discovering and gurus are figuring out are essentially your grandma advices.
Mm,
And we just forgot about all of them. We went through our lives, and then we're rediscovering all of that. And this is also the same thing. Like any muscle that you don't train is going to get weak and drop, right? So
mhm.
uh, use the tools, be efficient, don't worry about it, but at the same time also create processes where you can train your muscles. Like
All
when
right.
you when we look at, for example, like immediately my head goes towards dementia research, right? I happen to listen to a bunch of dementia research related podcasts, and a very, very common thing they recommend for you to keep your cognitive abilities is novelty, like learn a new language. I don't know, do puzzles, do new things, learn new skills, etc., etc. That's exactly the reason. Like, because if you don't retrain your brain to learn new things, you're going to get dementia type of problems, right? So that's the same here. Like use the tools because they make you efficient, but outside of that, maybe do some creative activity where it forces you to think about, I don't know, whatever skill it is that you're worried about losing.
Mm. That makes sense. So don't be afraid of using AI, use it by all means, but don't become entirely dependent to the point that you can't do it independently.
Don't be lazy is
Mm,
really,
mm.
still make sure you make time to practice that a skill that is
Awesome.
important to you.
Awesome. Great. Great. Any other questions if we can have them in the chat? Otherwise, Amir, thank you so much. This was such an illuminating chat. It was absolutely amazing. Edward, thank you. You've been asking the perfect questions all the time.
Yeah, I'm very curious. If I'm sitting in a room with Amir or even a couple of other people, I'm probably going to be asking these questions anyway.
Mhm, mhm.
So for me, that makes sense. I have a lot of ideas, a lot of questions, not enough time. Thank you very much, Amir, for your answers. I know that you definitely could have spoken for another 3 days without any issue, with enough coffee.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for attending. I will see you all in our next FinTech Fireside in January. Until then, take care of yourselves, stay safe,
Thank you.
and keep learning.